No, we support Diddy. What's up? We the supporters.
We've been anticipating it for months, and it finally happened. Charges filed against Sean Diddy Combs alleging coercion, violence, all wrapped up in a RICO charge. And while a few are still showing their support, the evidence is piling up against one of the top-selling rap artists of all time. We are taking a closer look at the best evidence the prosecution has that could send Sean Combs to prison for the rest of his life. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 54-year-old Sean Diddy Combs was let out of a federal courtroom in New York on Tuesday by marshals, uncuffed but headed straight for jail. He spent the night in the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center out in Brooklyn. It's a notorious jail that has had some pretty bad history of violence, suicides. Sex offender Jeffrey Epstein being held there prior to his trial when he was found dead in his cell in 2019. Actually, interestingly enough, Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, was actually asked yesterday if he was worried about Combs' safety given the Jeffrey Epstein situation. Essentially said, look, we have to strive to keep everyone protected. This is just the way the criminal justice system works. Interesting question, nonetheless. By the way, a form filed with the court on Tuesday afternoon lists Sean Combs as the defendant, and then under bail disposition, detention, risk of flight/danger, it has an X mark next to it. Also checked is the box next to defendant arraigned, pleads not guilty. Now, we've gone over the 14-page indictment filed against Combs in the Southern District of New York, plus letters regarding bail sent to the judge by both the prosecution and the defense. You can check out the Sidebar episode that we did there. We kind of did a deep dive. You can check it out on the Law and Crime Network YouTube page. But right now, what we want to talk about is something else. So the documents, what they do is they give us a better idea of what Homeland Security agents found inside of Combs' homes in Los Angeles and Miami when they were raided back in March, as well as other evidence that they have collected during the course of this investigation. The Southern District of New York is well known for being one of the top courts in the country. According to statistics from the United States Sentencing Commission in fiscal year 2023, the SDNY had more than 1,000 cases, and of those cases, 94% of the defendants ended up taking a plea, while only 6% chose to take their case to trial. And the court's conviction rate is reported to be 95%. So in other words, if the Southern District of New York prosecutors file charges against you, it's safe to assume they've done their homework and think that they have a really solid case. So the U.S. Attorney here was asked during a news conference on Tuesday why the charges against Combs were brought in New York instead of Florida or California.
Well, I'm biased. I'm the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. I think that we have an outstanding track record of bringing some of the most impactful, sprawling, complex, difficult sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, you name it. The Southern District of New York can do it, and so we're very proud of that. And so the scope and complexity of this investigation isn't something that we ran from. It's something that we embrace, and we will continue to do that.
Now, as we sort through these legal filings and legal situations surrounding Sean Combs, can I just take a quick second to tell you guys about something else, something positive for once, something that I think you're actually going to really love. Would you want cash back when you buy gas and groceries? Because if you do, that's where our amazing partner and sponsor of Sidebar comes in, Upside. So Upside is a free app that is so easy to use. It gets you real cash back, money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. Just this weekend, I used Upside. I used it to find a gas station. I claimed an offer. I paid with my credit card at the pump, and then I followed the steps on the app to get cash back. It is so simple to use. It's free, so why not do it? And you can use Upside at all different kinds of places like restaurants and convenience stores. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code SIDEBAR, and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Okay, I want to talk about some of the strongest pieces of evidence right now against Sean Combs, the rapper producer. And to do that, I want to bring in two special guests. I'm joined by Colin Schmidt, retired FBI agent, CEO of Kronos Investigations, and Robin Nunn, trial attorney and federal litigator. It's great to have you both here. So first, Colin, what is your reaction to Combs' arrest and Combs' indictment?
Well, I think I was on one of your shows at the very outset of this when the search warrant occurred, and I was asked, okay, why didn't they arrest him and indict him right on the spot? And my statement then was they're putting their case together because he's such a public figure and he has so many resources. They want to make sure they get it right. So when I saw this indictment, as well as the detention memo that the prosecutor put over, it looks to me like they really, really did their homework and they're really making sure that these charges stick.
So, Robin, what do you think? Because this is interesting. You heard Damian Williams say they're confident their office should handle it. You know, there were raids in California and Florida. There seemed to be a connection to New York, saying that this criminal organization, this criminal enterprise, was based or had headquarters in the Southern District. What do you make of this case being spearheaded by them, and what do you make of the indictment that we saw?
Yeah, there are no stronger prosecution unit than the Southern District of New York. They have a special unit that is designed to take cases such as these sex trafficking, RICO organized crime rings. So I think Damian Williams is stating it pretty clearly and correctly that the Southern District of New York would be on anyone's top list of units of government agencies that would be able to handle something like this with a celebrity and the complexities and the number of witnesses, because it is such a elite and heavy conviction centered prosecution unit.
Look, the indictment and the bail letter that was put forward by the prosecution, serious accusations. I mean, disturbing to say the least. And even though we don't know all the evidence, and we're going to get into some of it, they seem to be very confident in their case. But it also, we didn't know how many victims there were. It seems that one of the charges is at least with respect to just one victim. Racketeering cases can be complicated. But saying that, do you feel that this is a strong case based on the allegations put forward?
Yeah, this is one of the strongest sex trafficking cases that I've ever seen. While the indictment was not as detailed as I was expected, and there were some allegations that I suspected might be made that were not, such as, underage victims or, perhaps murder or, things like that. This was focused enough and had enough meat that I feel like it'll be very difficult, to sort of get out of these allegations. It seems like they've interviewed a number of witnesses. I think they said at least 50 victims and witnesses that have already been sort of interviewed and have agreed to cooperate in this, and I'm sure that there are many more, and they're even looking for more. So I think that they feel pretty strongly that they've put together a strong package, and I think they're pretty confident.
Do you agree the way he was arrested? This became a big issue yesterday. He came to New York, was at the Park Hyatt. He and his attorneys knew he was going to be hit with charges. In fact, his attorney said to the media before the indictment was unsealed, we anticipate racketeering and sex trafficking charges. But yet, despite that, they took issue with the way that he was arrested and he was apprehended and taken into custody. I think he wanted to surrender himself. Do you disagree or agree with the way that it was handled?
I'm a little agnostic on that. The bottom line is he's accused of very, very serious crimes. I mean, there was allegedly harm done to people. And if they want to go out and arrest him and do it in that manner, that's their prerogative. And frankly, that's their right. So for them to say, well, he was going to turn himself, he was going to do this, we don't know what he's going to do, because right after or near the time of when this first search warrant was done at his place in LA, apparently he got on a plane and flew down to Florida. So he's already shown a propensity to move when there's pressure. So I think the New York authorities thought, well, we got to make sure we get this right. We don't want to take any chances of a flight from this guy, because if they tried to track him down in a foreign country, it would be an absolute nightmare.
By the way, I was talking last night about this, and I was asked, why didn't he just leave the country? Right? He knew the charges were coming. Why didn't he just leave the country? And I said, well, the authorities could have arrested him immediately on the spot if they knew. But would that mean that they were tracking him beforehand? They knew when he was boarding a flight? And he's been moving around, right? He hasn't just stayed in one place during the course of this investigation. What would have prevented him from getting on the plane, having a flight plan for, I don't know, let's say California, let's say Colorado, let's say New York, and just saying, keep going and go to some country that doesn't have extradition? What prevented him from doing that? And what would be the way authorities could track him and stop him from doing that?
Well, to do that, it takes a lot of moving parts because he's going to have to get pilots that are going to participate in that conspiracy to flee. The pilots also have to file a flight plan. They also have to pick a country to go to that's going to be friendly to his issues. That's not going to extradite him. And he also, when that plan is filed, then he has to go through a process with Customs and Border Protection to be in terms of being able to go to the next country. So I'm sure he had considered that, and I'm sure he took the advice of his lawyers and decided not to do that, because if he had fled, then this would have amplified, and then the full force of the United States government would have come down on tracking him down and bringing him back.
Do you think they were tracking him though? Like, not necessarily like they had a surveillance team watching him at all times, but do you think investigators, do you think federal authorities kind of knew what he was doing?
Well, I think based upon the number of people who have come forward in terms of the indictment, I think they had people that were likely reporting on him, reporting on his actions and his movements, as well as the fact that they put so many resources to this. It would be reasonable for them to be watching his phones, watching his computer activity, and frankly having more people around him who are informing on him and his behavior.
I want to go into some of the evidence now and talk about what could be the strongest pieces. And to be clear, it's not entirely evident what the prosecution has, what people said to them, what the physical evidence is, what the digital evidence is, but let's go through it. So the prosecution says that many of the accusations against Combs can be corroborated by witnesses. And this is mentioned several times in the prosecution's letter to Judge Robin Tarnowski, where they were arguing against bail. For example, on page 2 of that letter, it says, quote, "At least a dozen witnesses will confirm that they personally observed the defendant's violence towards women and or the injury sustained by women at the defendant's hand." Then on page 11, it says, "Dozens of victims and witnesses have provided detailed, credible, and corroborated information against the defendant." Page 13, quote, "As to witnesses to date, the government has conducted interviews with over 50 victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or experienced the defendant's abuse. The government only expects that number to continue to grow, given that the investigation, which is now public, is ongoing." So, Colin, how does law enforcement even go about this? Finding these people, conducting these interviews? What do you think that's about?
Well, 2 points here. Number one, he corroborated his behavior himself with that video that came out of him assaulting his girlfriend in the hotel, which was somewhat hard to watch as a father of a daughter and somebody who's been in law enforcement. Secondly, you talk to one person, and the most basic question you ask at the beginning, middle, or the end of the interview, is there anybody else? Oh yeah, I have this girlfriend that also suffered this type of behavior from him. And then you go to that person, and then, oh yeah, I got this person, I get this. So it ends up being a string or a network of people, because frankly, these women are most likely associates with each other or know each other. And they may even be close friends, and they've been in the circle that was basically targeted by Sean P. Diddy Combs, as well as the people around him that were assisting him in this behavior.
And we're going to also get to this a little bit when we talk about the digital evidence, but how do authorities corroborate what they're being told? Is it they hear a consistent pattern over speaking to multiple people? If 5 people say the same thing, okay, unless they coordinated this, it looks like it might be true, or it looks like there might be probable cause here. Or is it also looking at their phones, looking at other evidence that was collected during the course of the raids and saying that matches up to their story? I imagine the fact that, I said this before and I'll say it again, the idea that anybody can sue anybody. I mean, you're not supposed to file frivolous lawsuits, but it seems on the outset that you have prosecutors who are believing the accounts of these accusers, at the very least, it seems Cassandra Ventura, and filing criminal charges based on those accounts. So it seems that, authorities are believing what's being told, and they have the corroboration. It's not just the accounts of these people, but other evidence to back it up. Now, again, their stories might be similar, but I guess the question is, how do authorities corroborate what they're being told?
Well, the first thing, pattern is corroboration. So if you have 50 people saying the behavior was the same pattern or he took the same actions, and he's been accused. We don't know until he's seen his day in court what really happened. But that's the first level of corroboration. The second thing is apparently they seized videos from his house in California, and that's going to be extreme corroboration right there because it's going to play out right in front of them. And then the third piece of this is the digital evidence, is the text messages, is the communications that he had with these women based upon, and every one of them is likely saved those text messages on their phones and were able to give screenshots to the authorities. So it appears to me that the evidence is overwhelming. However, we're only going to know if it truly is overwhelming once he has his day in court.
I think it is interesting how many people were apparently interviewed. And we're not entirely sure if all the people who filed lawsuits against Sean Combs are the main accusers, but it seems to me, at least from Cassandra Ventura's point of view, it seems that prosecutors have built their case based on those allegations. And I said this yesterday, and I say it today. It's one thing for somebody to sue somebody else, right? We have a lower standard. They shouldn't file frivolous lawsuits, but you have to, filing a civil lawsuit is very different than criminal charges. For prosecutors to believe these accounts and seemingly have it, people who are corroborating one another, there's a pattern there, but also maybe corroborated by the digital evidence, that is very significant that you have civil lawsuits that may have triggered a criminal prosecution.
I think that's right. I think that the civil complaints, which we saw, there were many, definitely got the ball rolling. But I would say that it was the video of Cassie, that violent incident that we saw in that hotel lobby that I guess came out of the blue, that really was what I think put the nail in the coffin. That was actually cited to in the indictment as something that they planned to use as evidence. And actually, I believe, led to the enhancements that we saw on what they're seeking as far as prison time.
And essentially, he could be looking at life in prison if he's convicted across the board. I am curious, is it a clear case for you when you hear the different accounts? Because they're saying there's a lot there. They're saying he operated a criminal organization that engaged in forced labor, kidnapping, arson, violence. They're saying that it was a common purpose to protect Diddy, to satisfy his sexual desires, to make money. There's a lot thrown out there. Is this a tough case to ultimately prosecute? And then you have the sex trafficking charge. You have the transportation for purposes of prostitution charge. Is this a tough case to prosecute? Is it a clear case to prosecute?
Yeah, I think it's always a tough case, right? I think that a lot of work and evidence has gone into leading up to now in terms of bringing this indictment, in terms of having that initial hearing and sort of having him arrested and bringing these charges. However, I do think that Diddy has very competent legal counsel. I think that they have seen this probably coming for some time. I think that while this case feels like R. Kelly all over again to me, where you obviously have, sort of a video of an underage person, that was involved and introduced, I think that this has, sort of samplings of that, but I assume that the defense is going to say that he did not do this, right? That this wasn't an organized crime syndicate that the prosecutors are accusing him of. This is a group of friends having a sex party. Yeah, it's not what you want to necessarily hear about. No one really possibly, likes it, but it is what it is. People like Diddy, people wanted to be around him, and they allow themselves to be sort of manipulated sometimes into perhaps doing things that sound unsavory when heard in the news. I think that is the crux of what the defense's sort of argument will be, and I guess the question will be, what do you believe?
Continue on with this. When agents ended up searching Combs' homes back in March, they left with a lot of evidence. There were weapons, both seemingly legal and illegal. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams showed photographs of some of them during that news conference.
Here are some of the items that we recovered during the searches. As you can see here, this is a drum magazine, large capacity. and it contains, I believe, 59 rounds. I mentioned as well, we recovered 3 AR-15s. This is a close-up shot of one of the AR-15s, and you can see right here, the serial number has been thoroughly defaced. Another picture of more ammunition and parts of 2 AR-15s right there.
Okay, so first let me ask you, why would someone deface weapons like this?
Well, to hide the ownership of the weapon, and so or the origin of the weapon. So depending on where he got it, that he may be defacing it, or whoever defaced it. So if that weapon had been used in a crime prior to him possessing it. So that's one of the number one reasons, as well as be able to keep transferring that weapon amongst other people, because there's no way of tracing that weapon.
Were you surprised that he wasn't charged specifically with those gun charges? Remember, so it's part of the overall racketeering case. It's an example of a criminal organization, but he wasn't charged specifically, which my understanding is a federal crime, possession of a weapon that has an obliterated serial number. I think the suspect in the second attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump has been hit with that charge. Were you surprised that Combs was not hit with that?
No, because it's coming. I believe they're gonna supersede with this indictment with more charges. That's generally they start with this one, kind of see how it fleshes out, and then they'll determine what they need to actually add on, depending on how the evidence starts playing out amongst the people that are going to start coming forward, because they're probably looking not only to corroborate the human trafficking, but they also want to corroborate all this possession of all these firearms.
Right. And look, a little bit more about evidence here, talking about strong evidence. Apparently, investigators collected a lot of electronic data, which can be crucial in a case like this. We talked about it, but the prosecution writes in their bail letter, the electronic evidence is similarly vast. The government has sought and obtained numerous search warrants for such evidence, in addition to obtaining evidence voluntarily from certain victims and witnesses. Setting aside devices seized in connection with the government's arrest, the government has obtained over 90 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, as well as over 30 other electronic and storage devices, such as hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, and a surveillance system. This electronic data comes from the defendant himself, as well as co-conspirators, victims, and witnesses, and chronicles much of the defendant's criminal activity as it occurs. And the government also sent out subpoenas to all sorts of companies and associates connected to Combs. It says, quote, finally, the evidence includes records obtained pursuant to over 300 grand jury subpoenas and other voluntary productions. These materials come from over 100 entities and individuals, including communications providers, tech companies, social media companies, banks, and other financial institutions, airlines, hotels, car services, and other travel-related companies, escort services, and even the defendant's companies and wealth management firm. So that is a lot. What can we expect?
Well, and I believe the Homeland Security investigations are leading this investigation. And frankly, they're very good at what they do. So, and I'm sure they have a team or even a task force looking at this, because the alleged criminal conspiracy is so vast and there's so many victims. So what I would expect is, once they get through this evidence, the evidence, it appears to be overwhelming, because you're going to see all the text messages, all of his statements that are going to incriminate himself with all of these people. And frankly, this has been going on for so long. I think there was a comfort level that he had, or his circle had, where they thought they weren't going to get caught. They could just continue to do this. And then frankly, that the hammer fell. So there's so much here that if there was going to be a trial, it would likely be something that would take months in terms of presenting all of this evidence.
And by the way, they say that the investigation is ongoing. Is it possible that investigators are still combing through this material? It's been a while. It's been since March since they did those raids. But remember, they interviewed people. They spoke to these alleged victims. That could have been going on before or after the raids. So, I mean, do you think they're still combing through this evidence? When they say the investigation is ongoing, I think that means more people to come forward. How does it work?
Absolutely. They're going to continue to comb through that evidence. And then once they come through that evidence, that might lead to more search warrants or more subpoenas or more court orders to get cloud-based information. as well as the fact that more people are going to be coming forward, and then they're going to lead them to getting more electronic evidence. So this thing is going to go on until there's a trial or there's a plea agreement.
And I'll just finish up with this last part, that the prosecutors, they sent to the judge before the bail hearing this attachment, Exhibit A, which was the surveillance video of Combs allegedly attacking his then girlfriend Cassandra Ventura in a Los Angeles hotel. And Ventura was allegedly attempting to leave the hotel after a alleged freak-off session where she was apparently drugged and forced to have sex with male prostitutes. And then Combs comes running down the hallway in a towel, throws her to the ground. That's the allegation from the video. Now, the government says that this very disturbing footage is proof of Combs' temper, his violent nature. It shows how far he will go when he doesn't get what he wants. But I also think it's key. I think that's a key piece of evidence. But I also think it's important, if it was in Combs' possession, if it was found during the course of this investigation, that is significant because it would, I think, bolster the claim that he tried to get that footage and he tried to silence this, right?
Well, on that note, I believe somehow it was leaked from the hotel, if I remember correctly, and it was independent of him. So actually, that actually leads to more credibility for the evidence because it came from an independent source that had nothing to do with this. And then furthermore, he came out afterwards and apologized for his behavior and said he was in a bad place. So that apology basically was a confession that it was indeed him. Now, obviously, we know it was him, but then he basically owned his behavior. So with that, he basically authenticated the video and corroborated the video with his own statement right afterwards when it was released to the media. So that video, yes, that is very damning, and I believe they attached it because it was already in the public domain. But it appears that they have more of this type of video, of this behavior on video, based upon all the stuff that they seized from his houses in California and I believe in Miami.
All right, so clearly a lot to process. Want to thank Colin Schmidt, Robin Nunn. Thank you both so much for coming on. That's all we have for you right now, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.